Thank you, Boaz, and good evening to everybody. To cover such a topic, the impact of the Middle East turmoil on the global, regional, and Israeli arenas, it takes more than 10 minutes, and this is what I got at the beginning, and which I declined. So after a long discussion, they added another 5 minutes, which reminds me of a story about Kissinger when he served as the Secretary of State and the National Security Counselor to the President. And the story goes as follows. He would assign his young whiz kids towards the end of every working day with assignments to prepare papers for the first meeting next morning. And the next morning, each one would come and present his short paper, and Kissinger would ask every one of them, is this the best thing that you can produce? Which they hesitated to answer, and then he instructed them to go back and to prepare a better one, the best they can. I'm telling this story because in order to try and cover most of the relevant issues pertaining to the topic of this panel, I decided to put it in writing and in a style of bullets, in order to do the best within the 15 minutes that 14 minutes already. Okay, so let's start. I need a technician. Oh, it's working. Okay. The first point that I want to stress is I call it the paradigm of instability, and it goes like what you see on the boards. Instability breeds terrorism, and terrorism breeds instability, and the problem, of course, is how to address this vicious circle. No? Oh. Now the second point that I want to put forward to you is the following: which political system is preferable in a terrorist environment? Is it democracy? Is it dictatorship? Or is it a Sharia state? And my answer would be that sometimes it is preferable to choose the second, in order to prevent the first from enabling the third to take over. And here I add in brackets that, of course, we should hope for an enlightened dictatorship that cherishes stability, security, and welfare of its citizens. I added this sentence for the sake of political correctness, of course. Okay. Now, what are the preconditions and some conducive factors for the survival and growth of terrorism? The first one is, of course, political instability and/or a political vacuum. Second is financial resources. Media as a force multiplier that serves the purposes of terrorism and terrorists. Free communication, and territory for training, preparing, and launching terrorism. Which of the above components exist? Well, the Middle East is one big quagmire of instability. And there is an abundance of financial support to terrorists and terrorist organizations. States supporting terrorism, various political and economic wealthy groups, interested wealthy religious entities and donations, big profit from cooperation with organized crime. In addition, terrorism receives free media coverage real-time and globally. And if we say that the aim of terrorism is to terrorize, one of the best tools in order to achieve this terror of citizens around the world is media coverage, and they get it around the clock and free of charge. And the last point is internet as the wet dream of any terrorist. All their communication today is through the internet. Next point is that the free world global cooperation is a prerequisite for success in fighting terrorism. Just to quote the, if I'm not mistaken, the first secretary of the newly formed HLS ministry, John Ashcroft, he said, simply put, international terrorism made international cooperation mandatory rather than elective. And the means of how to do it is first and foremost by intelligence sharing, and then operational cooperation. And I must tell you that during my time as the director, operational cooperation was very rare because each one of the intelligence organizations around the world used to keep his tools, means, sources very close to his heart. But terrorism was the main cause to change this thinking and to realize that to stand a fair chance to cope successfully with the terrorism phenomena is by not only intelligence sharing but also by cooperation in operations. Third is to do everything which is possible not to block financial flow that serves the purposes of the terrorist organizations, and streamlining legal legislation. On this point, I must say that the international legal system dealing with matters of terrorism is not streamlined. I can state regretfully that even the definition of terrorism has not reached an international ultimate accepted definition. If you open the Google and you look for the definition of the Pentagon, you have one definition. You look to the site of the state, there is another one, Homeland Security, a third one, and it is, to my very humble opinion, it is high time to reach a global accepted definition of the phenomenon. What do we have at present, and where is it heading? Post-September 11 and until 2008, there was a huge leap in developing and building the means, measures, and capabilities to address international terrorism. The organizational reform which took place in the United States, mainly building the HLS department, I'm told that it was the biggest administrative reform in the U.S. since the end of World War II. Am I right? I am right. Yes. The issue, the topic of terrorism, global terrorism, became a first priority on the list of threats of all Western, at least Western intelligence organizations. Big budgets were allocated to build the capabilities. Technology, R&D did magic in order to develop new capabilities. There was a big development of new military doctrines and technologies. Just to mention one is the drones expertise became the top of the line weapon and method in order to inflict on the terrorist the price that they should pay. And the last one is legislation, in which also a very big leap has been done. Since the global financial crisis, the overall landscape tips in favor of terrorism. Priorities in Western democracies have changed to domestic issues, and American withdrawal from Iraq and Afghanistan has proved to the leaders of radical Islam that America is tired of wars. President Obama's attitude in the following cases. In Libya, gave the message that America prefers to lead from behind rather than to be at the head. The case of Mubarak sent a message that democracy is above all. The case of Syria represented the passing initiative to Putin. Sisi proves that Muslim Brotherhood are a legitimate player, and Iran represented the approach that negotiation and not containment. All these, to my humble opinion, is a death blow to the perception of America as the savior of the world, and the notion that security and political stability could be precursors to economic growth and democracy. In other words, in the Middle East, it is not, again, to my humble opinion, it is not advisable to start with democracy and then to address other problems. Europe's perception is of an entity that has lost its compass. Instead of pursuing federal unity, it goes the other way around. Just look at the result of the last elections to the European Parliament. Now this sketch below shows you that from 45 to 90, the world was a bipolar world. Then it turned to be a one-polar world, and that one polar was, of course, the US. And around 2005, we started to move on to a new phase of multipolar world. I believe that the multipolar world will play to the hands of radicals. Some indicative phenomena in recent years that radical Islam has not yet reached its zenith. The Spring Revolutions as a catalyst to extremism and fanaticism. There is no one case of successful transition of political regime as a result of the Spring Revolutions. The social networks only succeeded to reach the heights of the minarets, and I quoted the very well-known journalist Tom Friedman. Homegrown terrorists are a force multiplier and a strategic threat. Since the revolution in Libya, radical Islam has spread southward till Benin and Togo, causing havoc to the African continent. The abduction of 400 girls in Nigeria, use of chemical warfare, use of IEDs in scale unknown before, all these serve as an indication that radical terrorism has not yet exhausted its means of terror. Does it affect Israel, and how? The working assumption is that the Islamic Palestinian terror is deeply inspired by the global jihad. Yet, at today's juncture, various constraints limit the Hamas and Islamic Jihad terror activities. Continuous flow of jihadists from Afghanistan in the east, westward to Iraq, Syria, and the Sinai. Global jihad already has a presence along Israel borders and has perpetrated some terror acts like rockets launching from the Sinai and Jordan. The Syrian border is still quiet. The question is, for how long? The threat from Sinai and Jordan can be addressed through good cooperation with the Jordanians and the Egyptians, which is not the case with the Syrians. On the Syrian front, we should be vigilant and prepared for any eventuality. Potential cooperation between Hezbollah and jihadist forces should be expected, and the global envelope, at this point of time, probably will not be enthusiastic to intervene in case of a deterioration of the situation, to open or full-fledged hostilities. Thank you.